Thank you so much for coming out to the meeting of the Oklahoma Orchid Society. And I'm just so delighted that you're here to hear about the amazing trip that some of us took to the Brazilian Amazon on the Rio Negro River. Like Doug said, I am from South Florida, and I've been a longtime member of the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society. That's my home society, but I joined the Oklahoma Orchid Society in 2019 when I came to town to care for my sister who was very ill. And the friendships that I made in the Oklahoma Orchid Society really helped me to get through a very difficult time in my life. And so the OOS will always have a warm spot in my heart. And thank you so much for your kindness and your graciousness and welcoming me. So it was for a number of months that I attended meetings in person when I was here. And then the pandemic hit, and I was able to go back and live in Florida again. And because of the pandemic, OOS began offering Zoom meetings. So I could participate for a couple of years on Zoom. And then once the pandemic was largely over, OOS was kind enough to continue to offer that Zoom link so long distance members like me could continue to be connected. And so that's why I'm here today to do this presentation, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Just one more thing before we start on the orchids, to put in a little plug for the Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society. We are having our big annual show the first weekend of January. It's January 5th, 6th, and 7th. And it is not to be missed. We missed last year on account of the pandemic, but we're going to be back bigger and stronger. So I hope some of you, if your travels take you to South Florida, that you'll be able to stop in and take that in. So I titled this the Rio Negro Orchid Adventure. And this orchid on the title slide is probably my favorite orchid that we discovered on this trip. And we'll be seeing more pictures of it in its habitat as we continue on. We lived on this amazing riverboat called the Otter. Not the Queen Elizabeth, not even Carnival cruise ship, but it was home for 11 days and 10 nights. So you can see what I mean. It's not the Queen Elizabeth. The rooms were a little bit like camping, but they were clean and tidy and comfortable. And you can see on the left side of the screen the dining room where we ate family style, wonderful meals. And I'll be showing you pictures of our feasts. And I'm going to try to make the pointer work. Uh-oh. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. Oh no, what did I do, Doug?
Blackout. Yeah, I think she pressed the button that made it go over the black.
I've never seen it do that. Oh, I don't know what made it go black.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to point out. On the wall in the dining room, there was this ginormous map, and that showed where we would be traveling. And so we often studied that. So before we get into the orchid pictures, I just wanted to give you an idea as to where we were. So we flew into Manaus, right here. It's a huge port city. You think of a port and you think it must be on the ocean, but it's an inland port. And there's so much cargo comes in from all over the world, and it gets distributed throughout South America from Manaus. So that's where we got on the riverboat. And this is where we traveled, where this pink line is. This is the Rio Negro. Now, all of this light pink area, this represents the Amazon. The Amazon River is from this point, from Manaus, and it goes to the Atlantic Ocean. From here, going this way, there's a variety of different rivers, and many people call this the Upper Amazon River. But the Brazilian people refer to the Upper Amazon River as the Solimões River. And it's a very different kind of river than the Rio Negro. Here, outside of Manaus, is where the two rivers meet up with each other. And it's a very famous place that is referred to as the meeting of the waters, where the dark water of the Rio Negro, you can see kind of darkish color, meets up with the more tan or brown river here, the Solimões, or the Upper Amazon River. And they travel together for about 5 to 6 miles side by side until they eventually blend and it becomes the Amazon River. And so here, Zoe is pointing to this interface of the two colors. And if you close your eyes and you put your hand in the water, you can feel the difference in the temperature. Because black absorbs the light and it's hotter. And so we tried that, and it was amazing to be able to experience it, not only seeing the color, but feeling the temperature. So on our first day on the Otter, Gilberto Castro, who is the owner of the Otter and the builder, he built it from scratch. It is just an amazing feat of construction, and many different kinds of tropical woods are included in the construction of this vessel. So here he's utilizing this map on the wall to explain where we are and where we're going to be going all the way up the Rio Negro River towards Colombia. So again, you can see here is Manaus. And there we're going to go upstream, and all these tributaries. We spent we would travel on the river, and then we would go into these tributaries and just see lots of orchids and other things.
And you're gonna get on the news. And you're gonna come here, and believe it or not, we're gonna here it is.
It's all very slow. Now it's going up an inch a. It's not very high this year, but it's good high. 27, one of the medium of a yard, 3 yards. Nice. But you'll have to look at it this way. Here, where we park now, here to the south side is like 10 miles. So Rio Negro doesn't move very fast. When Rio Negro doesn't come from the high mountain. There's some water that comes from the mountain. You're gonna go. Yeah. You're gonna go to the shallow and get there and find in there's a game where road mountain there and there we did lucky every time to see not either all the blue water involved and about on Bateman Village was not even mentioned for that area there and thus down there but we'll be seeing quite a few orchids.
So when he refers to the blue orchids, that is the tidal slide orchid, the Agonesia cyanea, referred to as the blue orchid. Yes. They call it a canoe or a skiff, and they use the terms interchangeably. They had motors at the back, and it's not a canoe like a paddling canoe, but I guess in Brazil they call vessels like that canoes. Mhm. So he was talking about the height of the water, and he said it was high, but not too high this year. He said 27, well, that's meters. So that's 81 feet. And then he said it had 3 more yards to go, 9 more feet. And so the expected high in June would be about 90 feet. We were there early May, and it was about 80 feet. So this picture illustrates one of the cabins in the Juma Hotel, the Juma Jungle Lodge. Now, Zoe, my traveling companion, Zoe and I, we stayed at a hotel in the city of Manaus before we boarded the Otter. But the Juma Hotel also has an outpost in the jungle, and they are these jungle lodges on stilts. So what you see here is the mirror image of the lodge reflected in the water. And here you see it at in November at low water on stilts. It took us a long time to wrap our head around this massive rise in water, and it happens every year.
So how is the river like salt water or is it?
No, it is fresh water.
Fresh water.
It is fresh water. So here are 4 pictures, and this is a picture I took of framed photographic artwork from our hotel in Manaus. And it shows from the low water in November to the high water in June. and 2 steps along the way. And it happens every year like clockwork.
For how long?
It's November. And then this is probably around January or February, and this is the spring, and then this is June. So it's 6 months. 6 months to build up and 6 months to go back down.
That the vegetation, nearby vegetation, that doesn't ground, doesn't rot.
We could not understand that, but it's material that has adapted over millennia to be able to thrive being submerged for so many months. Now, the reason why the Rio Negro River is black is because of the excessive amount of tannin in the water from the decomposing leaf material, which is underwater and decaying. So that is what gives it the color.
Does it taste different?
Well, they purified the water, and so we drank Rio Negro River water, but it was purified, so it had no taste. Yeah, there were some people on our trip who did go swimming off of the boat, so they probably wound up tasting some of the water, but I didn't do that. So this is a real typical memory that I have of my time on the Rio Negro, just gliding through the treetops. It was mesmerizing. And we just couldn't believe our eyes that that's where we were. So on our very first full day on the river, we got up real early, and we had breakfast early, and this is a typical day, going out on the 2 canoes and just looking to see what we could see, what we could find. And so someone has spotted an orchid here, and so we've our guides, there was a guide in the front of the vessel and a guide in the back. And so they were able to snuggle the boat up real close to the trees so that we could get a closer look. And this is what it was. Some of you may be familiar with it. Does anyone grow Prosthecia fragrans? The kissing cousin is Prosthecia radiata, which I happen to own, and it's in full bloom right now, and it looks identical. The foliage is identical, the flowers are identical, the fragrance is identical, but they bloom at 6 months opposite to each other. I have a friend in Hollywood who has fragrance. I have radiata, and we compare notes, and they're always several months apart. So it was really thrilling for me to be able to see this growing in the wild. And then this was another orchid that I grow at home. I rarely get to see the flowers because as soon as the inflorescence sprouts, it seems to either get self-pollinated or it just starts to crack open a little bit. Some pollinators must get inside. So I have it loaded with seed capsules, but I think I've actually only seen an open flower on mine twice. But here in the wild, look at all these seed capsules. So
Look at how it grows on the tree.
yeah, so it readily gets pollinated. These were growing in trees that were all in similar area, like the seeds must get scattered on the wind, and they wind up getting distributed on nearby trees. And so we were like seeing them everywhere. Epidendrum nocturnum. And our guides were amazing. They were very adept at climbing trees, and they obliged our every wish to get a closer look at orchids that if we were not able to see them from where we were. And we'd be getting neck strain by by tilting our heads back and looking up into the treetops to see what we could see. So this gives you a little flavor for what we experience. That was Vicki Halleck speaking. She's the president of our Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society. And she was very exuberant and got included in that video. So we built up a tremendous appetite, being out in the fresh air and watching the guides do all the work climbing the trees. And so we would come back to the boat and we would have just a huge buffet feast laid out. I wondered if there would be sufficient food for a vegetarian like myself, and there was, but there was plenty of fish and meat and chicken, all that for everyone, and everything in between. Now, I am going to direct your attention to this dish, and we're going to see that over and over again. It was served to us usually 2 meals a day, sometimes 3 meals a day. And I will tell you later what it is. So the first morning that where we had been motoring all night, and the cabin that Zoe and I shared was right in the bow of the boat. We were very lucky. We got that spot. And so we could hear like the rustling of the trees and kind of brushing against the branches. And I said, Zoe, I think we've landed. And I ran to the window, and that's what I saw. And our crew member had just arrived and was tying us up. They don't anchor. Very rarely did we anchor in the middle of the river because it was easier and more secure to tie up to a tree. So I found that kind of thrilling. So there were so many tiny little orchids and many maxillarias that we saw. My cell phone is an old iPhone 7. So although I could get pictures like that, I could not get pictures like this. So I'm giving credit to our leader of the tour from the Orchid Conservation Alliance, Peter Tobias. And I'll tell you a little bit more about his background later on in the program, but he took fabulous close-up pictures of the orchids. He knew the names of practically everything that we had seen. And if he didn't know the name, he knew how to do the research, and then he would come back and tell us, this is what it is. On the Otter, there was a marvelous library of orchid books. And so we would pour through the books and cross-reference, and then we would find out what it was. Another maxillaria, Posiflora. And although we didn't see any blooming vanillas, we did see vanilla. And although we spent most of our time on the canoes, looking at the trees, we did go ashore several times. And this was on one of our hikes. Although it was not in bloom, we were told that they know that it's Prosthecia or Encyclia randii, based on having seen the flowers during other trips that they'd taken at other times of the year. What was interesting is that this was growing not as an epiphyte, it was growing in the ground in lichen litter. So very fast draining, open, porous kind of arrangement that it was flourishing in. So all of that was just the preface, the preamble to getting to the main show, because we just fell head over heels in love with some of the other orchids that we were not familiar with before. So it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And so we would all go with our eyes peeled and our binoculars, and someone would say, oh, I think that's an orchid at, the 2 o'clock position. And so the crew member would just turn the boat around and we'd go off in that direction. And we got closer and closer, and this is what it was. Well, aside from Peter and Gilberto, the owner of the boat, none of us had ever seen this before. And it's Galliandra devoniana. Does anybody here grow Galliandra? There are other Galliandras, but we didn't even know the genus Galliandra. Well, now this is on our shopping list. We're all going to compete with each other to, if we see it at shows, it's the top of my list. So this is my friend Zoe, and I collect fragrant orchids. So I always want to know if it's fragrant. So she on her side of the canoe, she was very close to one of them. So she checked it out and she told us, yes, it was very fragrant. And this is a beautiful picture that Peter Tobias took of the Galliandra. It's a big flower. It's about 3 inches across. Yeah. So just spectacular. Now, Vicki Halleck, president of Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society, she was already familiar with the botanical artwork of the famous artist Margaret Mee. But no one else knew of her. Well, of course, Peter and Gilberto did, but not us on the trip. And there were a number of books in the Otters library of her work. She was a prolific artist and a writer. She kept extensive diaries. She was a British botanical artist who felt compelled to devote her life to documenting the flora of the Brazilian Amazon. And we enjoyed learning about her and seeing her illustrations of the various orchids that we had seen on this trip. So here's the next one we fell in love with. When we first saw this in a distance, we thought it might be some kind of a nest. There are a lot of weaver birds that make nests that look similar to that. But as we got closer and closer, we discovered this spectacular orchid. Does anyone know of this one, Scutecaria stelii? Yeah, we didn't either. And look at those gorgeous terete pendulous leaves. And these are about 2.5 inches in diameter, and these are also highly fragrant. and pleasantly fragrant. Again, it's on my shopping list. And Margaret Mee's illustrations from 2 of her different books.
I'm gonna stop you and ask a question, Claire. Obviously, you couldn't collect specimens there. That's probably a no-no against local conservation law and stuff, but is there anywhere you could buy stuff there and transport it with the United States, or is there also just an embargo?
No, you can't do that. But when we got back from the trip,
Mm-hmm.
the Redland Orchid Festival was taking place in South Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and I got back just in time for the last day of that show.
Mhm.
So I sought out the Brazilian vendors,
Mm-hmm.
and here's my list. And so they're promising that they will try to bring for me when they come to our January show. So the
Aw.
Brazilian nurseries,
Mhm.
they can propagate from seed and then eventually be able to offer some for sale. But no, you cannot legally, you cannot take from the
Okay.
wild.
Do you feel conservation is high in South American priorities? Like, do you feel like people are actually ensuring that people aren't just walking up and taking specimens out of the
And
forest?
they are taking specimens out. We had been told that we would see Cattleya eldorado.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the place where Peter and Gilberto had seen many eldorados in
Mhm.
previous years,
Mm-hmm.
and there were none. And so they attributed that to poaching.
Oh.
Yes. Unfortunate.
Is this tour that you're on, do they just specifically specialize in orchid
Yes.
tourists?
Yes, towards the end of the program, I'll tell you a little bit about the Orchid Conservation Alliance, which is the organization that offered this tour.
All right,
And they
thank
do
you.
tours all over the world specifically to see orchids in the wild.
Oh,
Yes.
beautiful, thank you.
Mhm. So again, like a needle in a haystack, we could see pink color in the distance. We got closer and closer to it. And this is what we found. Many beautiful Sobralia sicilis. Does anyone here grow this orchid? And I don't grow Sobralia, but many of my friends in South Florida do, and they have grown them not as an epiphyte on a tree trunk like that, but they've grown them terrestrially. Mhm. Yeah.
Very great.
Yes. And the flowers are short-lived, but they are frequent bloomers. And again, Margaret Mee's illustrations. And in this case, someone had spotted an orchid way up high, and we just couldn't with our binoculars and our camera. We just couldn't see what was there. So
Hope you trip those people. Yeah.
yeah. So this is Soldado, who is one of the 5 guides besides Gilberto. And he and the other men, they were like monkeys, able to experience climbing these trees. They had no fear. And they would bring the orchid, they'd pluck a little bit so that for research purposes, and they'd put it in their teeth so that they could climb back down with 2 hands and 2 feet. So this this bird, the screaming piha. The first time we heard that bird, everyone was like, "Oh my God, what was that?" we never saw a screaming piha, but you certainly heard them. And we saw many birds, but this was my favorite bird. And this is what Soldado brought down from the tree. Here he's handing it off to someone on our boat, and there's a close-up.
Want to say hello? Oh, over there, sorry. Okay.
And it was of great interest to me to see this because I collect brassias. I'd love to collect more brassias, but they tend to get kind of big. This was a miniature brassia. The plant was quite small in stature, and the inflorescence was petite, and it was fragrant. So this was in the early part of our 10-day trip. And all the specimens that we would collect like this, we'd bring them back to the boat, and they would just be not put in water, but just laid on the bookshelf. This flower stayed fresh and it stayed fragrant 24 hours a day for the whole trip. So that's on my shopping list. Brassia lawrenceana, a must-have. Now, Gilberto had told us when he was talking in front of the big green map, he said we would be going to the Jau National Park, which is one of the biggest parks in the Amazon. And so we have just arrived there and tied up our boat. And we were required to go ashore and to sign in, because they need to know who's in, and you have to sign out when you leave. And so that's our group. Here's Gilberto, the owner of the boat. And this is Peter Tobias, our leader from the Orchid Conservation Alliance. That's me, my traveling companion, Zoe. And half of the people on the tour were all from South Florida. And there were almost as many crew and staff as there were people on the tour. So very, very intimate. It was such a special trip to go in such a small group to such a special place. And here we're about to go ashore in a campina, which is an elevated little island in the river. And this is where we wound up discovering the blue orchid and photographing it. He's been with the boat for many, many years, and his son Marcos is also a guide on the boat. They took good care of us. We even had a handicapped gentleman on the boat who walked with a cane, and they facilitated him getting on and off the vessel and being able to participate in these hikes. So here it is, Agonesia cyanea. And we were a little confused to begin with, because in the books, we would see it in some of the books as Acacalis, but that name was changed. It was reclassified into a different genus, into the Agonesia genus. And it's growing in leaf litter on the ground. Yeah. Margaret Mee's illustrations of this beautiful orchid. And does anyone know the orchid grower, his nursery is called Springwater Orchids. His name is Tan Nguyen, Vietnamese gentleman. He's from Central Florida, and he specializes in lady slippers, but he has broad-ranging interests. And when I was Googling on, well, not Googling, but I was looking on Orchid Whiz, I was so surprised and delighted to see that this was his orchid. He had won an AOS award for it, the blue orchid. And there, again, it is growing in its natural habitat. So I see Sandy Block-Bresner is with us on Zoom from South Florida. And as I recall, Sandy loves to grow Cattleya violacea. And I think that I was the first person on the boat to spot this one. We were traveling upriver, and as the boat was going upriver, I saw a spot of color, and I called out, could be an orchid at 11 o'clock. And so they turned the boat around and nestled the bow in closer, closer, closer. And that's what it was. And from that point on, in that area, we saw many, many of these Cattleya violacea, all the same color, all relatives of each other. Again, a Margaret Mee illustration. Again, tying up. And although we would go out at least 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day, sometimes we went out at night.
That jaw music I hear?
It looks like there's nothing there. But there's a lot there. Frogs, the frogs. And the fellow who asked the question, you know, he asked, what are they calling for? And Gilberto said, they're calling for the ladies. Yeah. And on that nighttime excursion, we saw monkeys. We heard them. We heard all kinds of amazing night sounds in the jungle. So that was really quite thrilling for us. And this is Marcos. This is an example of how they would bring down a very small sample. We did not know what it was. And Peter did a lot of research. And this is what it is. So when we got back from the trip, one of the our friends who was with us on the tour, Melanie, she went to the Redlands Festival and she found a small specimen of this plant. I don't think it was in bloom, but because she had fallen in love with it on the trip, she snapped that up. So we saw many more orchids than I have time to show you, but we saw a lot of other stuff that goes beyond orchids. And first and foremost has to be the amazing landscape and the mirror images of the the clouds and the vegetation being reflected equally in the water. The water was almost always perfectly calm. We had one day of wet weather, and I wouldn't say choppy, but not like a mirror. But most every other time, just beautiful scenery, sunsets and sunrises, unforgettable. Very, very peaceful way to spend 10 days. And what I could not photograph was the heavens, the stars. I had never seen anything like that, living in South Florida, and before that, living in the Northeast, in New York and in Boston area. You don't see a lot of stars or a lot of planets. It was like being in a planetarium and just hundreds of thousands of twinkling little lights up there. So that was a thrilling experience, to be so far away from city lights that you could experience that. So I want to show you a little bit about the wonderful meals that we had. And again, to draw attention to this food item that we got every day. And it is manioc, also called yucca, not yucca. We have someone donated yucca plant seeds. That's not the same as yucca. It's also called cassava. And it's a tall shrub or a small tree, and it makes these big, fat, hard roots. It shows a cross section. This here is a picture from the internet showing how the native peoples would process the root. Does anyone here cook with? We were told that there's cyanide in the root, and it has to be processed a certain way so that you don't poison yourself.
Well,
And
yeah.
so they would grind it, and they could either boil it and the cyanide gases would escape, or they would rinse out the cyanide. And then we went to one place where they had this mammoth, like a paella pan, like had to be 6 or 8 feet diameter. And over a period of many hours overnight, they would slow cook it that way in order to drive off the gases. So we ate that every day. I can't say I developed a fondness for it, but I tried it at every meal. I tried to develop a fondness for it. This past summer in the news, there was a tragic story of a plane crash in the Amazon, and a mother with some small children were on the plane. I believe the mother did not survive, but the children were not found at the wreck. And so they survived for many weeks, maybe over a month, in the jungle. And when they were finally found, the news stories stated that they survived largely by consuming the manioc flour that they had with them on the plane. So it's a very high, not nutrient value in terms of minerals and vitamins, but high caloric value, and that sustained them for a long period of time. So there were 2 cooks on the boat, And they worked so hard just producing these amazing meals, not just hearty, flavorful, but very, very attractive. Every meal, there was something beautiful. So I did wind up taking quite a lot of pictures of the food. So right here, yes. When I saw that, I apologize for what I'm doing with the cursor. I thought that that was a loaf, a round loaf of pumpernickel bread. And I wondered, what was it doing on the bookshelf? Strange place to put a loaf of bread. And I tap on it, and it was hard. Then I looked at this, and I thought, I wonder if that is the lower half of that. And then I saw these Brazil nuts. This is the Brazil nut pod that is filled with Brazil nuts. And Brazil nuts come from Brazil. And Gilberto told us, you must never fall asleep under a Brazil nut tree. Because if one of those hits you and hits you in the head, it's not going to be a pretty picture.
How big is that?
Yeah. Like so. Yes. And so when they knew that I was vegetarian, they then began offering me various things with Brazil nuts because it's high in protein. And so they would they would shred it and toast it. And it was almost like coconutty. It was lovely. Yeah. They would do like a Brazil nut pilaf for me. Other people enjoyed it too. Yes. One day they took us to deserted side of, I mean, it was all deserted, but they took us ashore and they constructed from scratch a banquet table. And then in the background, you can see a seating bench. All of that, the crew constructed in the matter of a couple of hours. And they prepared some of the food on the boat, like, the salads, but most of it that required cooking and baking and roasting, they did that on fires that they built right there. Yes. And I would be remiss if I did not tell you about the favorite drink. It's called caipirinha, and it has to be made with a very special type of rum called cachaça that is available in Brazil. And I stuck with the local beer, but most of my friends were lined up to order their caipirinha. And even now that they're back home, they still exchange text messages about it's caipirinha time. And we saw wildlife, different kinds of monkeys, many squirrel monkeys, and we encountered many of them that were mothers with babies on their back. And we saw pink dolphins. Now, this doesn't look very pink color, but if more of the animal were out of the water, you'd see a pinkish grayish coloration.
Claire, be sure to tell them about the mosquitoes, because I thought, I'm so sensitive to mosquitoes, or have been in the past, that I had to ask her about, weren't the mosquitoes terrible on this trip?
Yes.
So,
well, we were concerned. Peter Tobias told us before the departure that you're probably not going to see mosquitoes, because we were asking, should we get malaria medication, which you have to take preventively. If you're going to do the malaria meds, you've got to start when you're at home and take it all the time you're gone and continue it once you get back. I don't like to take pills and stuff, so I bought all kinds of bug sprays, bug netting. I came prepared with physical protection, but some of my friends did start on the medications. I saw 2 mosquitoes in 10 days, and they were in our little bathroom in our cabin on the floor, really miserable, just kind of creeping along. They were not happy. And we never saw mosquitoes. And they said that the reason for that, Peter told us to begin with, but we didn't believe him. He said it's because the tannin in the water makes it, I think it was too acidic. It wasn't the right pH for the proliferation of the mosquito larva. So it's not the right habitat for them. I think on the Solomois River, it's a different story. But not on the Rio Negro. So, okay. So we saw birds, but because of my camera on my iPhone 7, I couldn't get pictures of birds. So that's why you're getting internet pictures. But I did take this picture of the nests of the yellow-rumped cacique weaver bird, because I was fascinated by the sculptural hanging nests that they produce. And this, we could see the weaver bird flying in and out of the trees where the nests were. And we could see that they were mostly black with a bright yellow marking on them. But we never saw them close enough that we could photograph like this. We saw lots of macaws. And what was fascinating to me is that they traveled 2 by 2 by 2, like Noah's Ark, 2 by 2, like a couple. So you'd see a couple of the turquoise one, and then a couple of the red ones would fly together and just fly over the boat as we would be going upriver. So that was fascinating. And it was getting to be the end of our 10 days, and we hadn't yet seen a sloth. And so many of us were really eager to see a sloth. And Gilberto said, don't worry. I know where they're hard to see, hard to notice, but I know where they are. He said, you have to go to where there are cecropia trees, because that's their favorite leaf. They'll eat other leaves, but they prefer the cecropia. So if you can find a stand of those trees and you look high up in the treetop, you can see, if you're lucky, you can see a mass. And if you're patient, maybe the animal is going to move a little bit. They're very sedentary and they're well camouflaged. So he said that those are sloths, but we couldn't really tell. And so we continued, and we actually verified that those on the left and the right, those are sloths. This is a picture from the internet. You'd never see it that clearly in the wild because they're so camouflaged and they choose to be deep inside of the foliage. Gilberto told us that this pattern of the fur being multicolored, that means it's a female, that the males are solid black. So he could see, and people with good binoculars, they could see that the animal was variegated fur.
Moment she would get out of it, you know, right now.
So they just kind of, they hang there. And, you know, as the wind makes the branches move around, they just kind of sway back and forth. And we did see, she had a baby on her belly. The monkeys, the baby's on their back, but the sloths, the baby's on the tummy. So that was one of the high points. And we learned about the pirarucu, which is the second biggest fish in the world. This particular one that we saw in captivity was not that big, but they can grow to 15 feet and they can weigh over 400 pounds. Yes, so went to the place where we went to see the pink dolphins, also had some of the like maybe 6 or 8 foot long pirarucu in a tank. And you can see the white string here. We were offered fishing poles with a line, and they would bait it for us, and you could offer the fish to the bait fish to the pirarucu, and they would jump out of the water, and you'd see the beautiful, beautiful red coloration. So I'm going to pass this around. And for people on Zoom, this is one of my pirarucu nail files. You'll see that it has 3 surfaces on it. The white and the outside curve, and the white is the most useful part for filing your nails. The brown part that's kind of lumpy is good if you have a callus. And on the inside white curve is good for buffing and doing fine finishing on your nails. That is the scale of these fish. The tongues are used for by native people for files and rasps. And also for like grinding. If you have a nutmeg seed, you can grind the nutmeg with the rasp tongue. And when you go to the local markets, they do sell the fish scales and the tongues. Yeah. And they serve pirarucu fish for dinner on several occasions. It's a very mild fish, and people really loved it. So the Orchid Conservation Alliance is the wonderful organization that took us on this unforgettable trip. It is a not-for-profit organization founded almost 20 years ago in San Diego, California. And they raise money in order to be able to contribute to the preservation and conservation of orchids in the wild by preserving the land, by land that is up for sale that might become developed. They will partner with other organizations in the local area in order to acquire it and maintain it as an orchid preserve. And so one of the nice things about taking a trip with the Orchid Conservation Alliance is that a substantial part of your tour fee is a contribution towards the conservation efforts. And it's in the vicinity of $1,000 per person. And after they calculate all the expenses and, you know, they pay Gilberto for the use of the boat, all of that, then they figure out per person how much the contribution is, but generally in the vicinity of $1,000. So it really makes you feel like You're on vacation, you're having a great time, but you're doing a good deed too. So on this chart here, you can see the 7 locations where they have reserves. And 1 is in Brazil, 3 are in Colombia, and 3 are in Ecuador. One of them is Dracula Reserve in Ecuador. That would be an interesting place to visit. This map shows, and this is material I got from their OCA website, shows where in South America their current reserves are located. This is our wonderful orchid leader, Peter Tobias, from California. And he is the former president of the Orchid Conservation Alliance. And he is currently a director of this organization and has a very distinguished biography. These are some of the other places in the world that the OCA has taken tours to.
That'd be fun.
Which one?
Switzerland.
Ah, yes. My friend Zoe, she is signed up to go to Madagascar. She tried to go this year, but they were sold out right from the get-go. So she was on the waiting list. She did not make it for, they're there right now. So she's going to go next year. And I'm going back to the Rio Negro. So many of us on this past trip in May, we had such a great time that we begged Peter to offer it again. And so we'll go to the similar places on the Rio Negro River, but at a different time of the year. We'll be 3 weeks later. So we're going to see pretty much different orchids. There may be a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, we're going to have a lot of new things to see. And it was just such an amazing time being on the boat and so relaxing, good company, great people. We learned so much that we're eager to go back. So anyone want to go with me? Great. Thank you. So I know we're getting close to the end of our meeting time. Do we have time for any questions?
Yes, let's have questions, and the microphones are for the folks on Zoom. We do have some folks on Zoom with us. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll come around with the mic.
So what kind of preparations do you have to make on going one of these South American trips? I imagine vaccinations or anything else you would warn people to take before they go on to their Rio Negro trip?
No vaccinations are required by Brazil to enter. And I had done my research. I was curious to know if I needed a yellow fever vaccine or typhoid. Ultimately, I chose not to do that. And I decided to do the bug spray and the long sleeve shirts and the long pants and the socks and the net. I didn't use any of that stuff because there were no mosquitoes. So those diseases, the vector is a mosquito. So no, you don't need it to worry about that. You do need to make sure your passport is current and is at least 6 months. To take any international trip to get back into the US, you have to show that it has 6 months longevity on it. That's the major thing. And a camera, a cell phone with a camera that's better than the cell phone 7. When I go back, I'm gonna have a
New iPhone.
number iPhone. Oh, binoculars, yes. I mean, we were all looking up. I did buy new binoculars specifically for that, and it was a good choice. Yes.
Claire, what was the climate like?
Oh, it was divine. Some people, like Vicky from our Fort Lauderdale Orchid Society, she was a little bit warm. I moved to Florida to be warm. So I was very comfortable there. I would say it was no different than South Florida, which I'm used to. I think people expect the Amazon is going to be like really humid and really hot. It was no different than Florida in the summer.
Winter in South America, that's a winter. In Brazil, it's
That
winter in June.
was their winter.
Yeah, so you're not
Yeah,
there.
so
once.
it's probably when it's their summer,
Hot.
that would be a different story in terms of your comfort level. But we would not be doing an orchid tour there because the orchids are high up in the treetop. That's why they take us in May or June. Because if you go when you saw those big stilts on that jungle lodge, the best binoculars are not going to give you a good view of the orchids up high. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Was there any luxury that you didn't have out there that maybe you should anticipate for? Because it looked like they accommodated you guys very well. You had seats, you had a nice like room and everything, but was there one thing that maybe you missed here that wasn't there?
No, our every wish was provided for. Everything was perfect, really. Yeah. Ah. It was very intermittent. It was so funny because no, there was no Wi-Fi on the boat, but we'd be traveling upriver and all of a sudden, bing, 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 bing on your cell phone,
Oh.
your OG&E bill has automatically processed. And you'd get like all this spam messages that were coming in for like 60 seconds. And then the boat would travel and you were out of the range of whoever's internet you were tapping into. It was nice to be able to get away. Really nice to just get away from it all. Yes. There must be snakes there, but we did not happen to see any. We saw lots of beautifully sculptured ant nests and wasp nests and bees nests hanging in the trees. And they didn't bother us any, but they were really beautiful to watch. I didn't have any pictures, but amazing bromeliads and various kinds of cactuses, believe it or not, in that wet environment. Certain kinds of cactus can thrive there. The trees, just giant trees that were 90 feet tall, beautiful trunks. It was just great to be able to be in the Amazon finally, and can't wait to go back.
Well, Claire, this was absolutely a phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much for coming up and sharing your fabulous trip with us. You are just a natural presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it was so much fun putting this together and having the opportunity and the excuse to be able to reminisce and revisit and put it all together. And so I thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.